So he bought a copy of the Gospel of Luke in Chinese. By patiently comparing brief verses with their equivalent in English, he uncovered the meanings of more than 600 characters. These he learned and made into a dictionary of his own. "I have begun to get up at 5 in the morning," he wrote to his sister at school, "and find it necessary to go to bed early. I must study if I am to go to China. I am fully decided to go, and am making every preparation I can. I intended to rub up my Latin and learn Greek and the rudiments of Hebrew and get as much general information as possible. I need your prayers." Several years working alongside his father in preparing prescriptions had given Hudson an interest in medicine. So when he heard that a physician in the seaside city of Hull needed an assistant, Hudson applied for the job and was accepted. Though this meant he had to move away from home, he was able to move in for a time with an aunt who lived in Hull and enjoyed all the benefits of home. Hudson's employer, Dr. Hardy, paid him a salary adequate for covering his personal expenses. The young assistant gave 10% of his income to the work of God and devoted his own time on Sunday evenings to evangelistic work in the poorest part of town. And the more exposed he became to the needs of the poor he met, the more seriously he began to think about his own comfortable lifestyle. If he spent less on himself, would he find even greater joy in being able to give more to others? Hudson decided to live out an experiment and try to answer that question. On the outskirts of town, beyond some vacant lots, sat a double row of cottages bordering a narrow canal in a neighborhood referred to as Drainside. The canal was really just a deep ditch into which the people of Drainside tossed their rubbish and sewage to be carried away with the tide. The cottages, like peas in a pod, followed the winding drain for a half-mile. Each identical house had one door and two windows, and it was for a rented room in one of these small shacks that Hudson Taylor left his aunt's pleasant home. Mrs. Finch, Hudson's new landlady, was a true Christian and delighted to have the young doctor under her roof. She did her best to make the chamber clean and comfortable, polishing the fireplace opposite the window and making up the bed in the corner farthest from the door. A plain wooden table and a chair or two completed the appointments. The room was only 12 feet square and was situated on the first floor of the bungalow, opening right out into the family kitchen. From Hudson's lone window he could look across the drain to a pub whose lights were useful on dark nights, shining across the mud and water of the drain. In addition to his rather dreary surroundings, Hudson's move to Drainside required him to provide his own meals. This meant that he bought his meager supplies as he returned from surgery and rarely sat down to a proper supper. His walks were solitary, his evenings spent alone, and Sundays brought long hours of work, either in his new neighborhood or among the crowds who frequented the Humber dock. Having now the twofold object in view, he recalled, of accustoming myself to endure hardness, and of economizing in order to help those among whom I was laboring in the gospel, I soon found that I could live upon very much less than I had previously thought possible. Butter, milk, and other luxuries I ceased to use, and found that by living mainly on oatmeal and rice, with occasional variations, a very small sum was sufficient for my needs. In this way I had more than 2/3 of my income available for other purposes, and my experience was that the less I spent on myself, and the more I gave to others, the fuller of happiness and blessing did my soul become. It was during this time at Drainside that Hudson gained a deeper, more painful understanding of the sacrifice that would be required to go to China. For it had been almost 2 years since he'd made the acquaintance of a talented and beautiful young music teacher from his sister Amelia's school, and Hudson had fallen in love. Though the girl was a Christian, she didn't feel at all called to the mission field. On more than one occasion, when they were talking about his plans, she asked Hudson if he couldn't serve God just as well at home as in China. But Hudson was sure of God's call. He was also deeply in love, and since she had never said she wouldn't be willing to go with him, he hoped and prayed that she would soon feel the same call he did. But just weeks after his move to Drainside, he got the final, heartbreaking word. She would not go to China. Hudson confided in a letter to his sister Amelia, "For some days I was as wretched as a heart could wish. It seemed as if I had no power in prayer, nor relish for it. And instead of throwing my care on him, I kept it all to myself until I could endure it no longer. Temptation gripped him, asking, 'Why should you go to China after all? Why toil and suffer all your life for an ideal of duty? Give it up now while you can yet win her. Earn a proper living like everybody else and serve the Lord at home, for you can win her yet.' Love pleaded hard. Then as he told his sister, 'In the afternoon, as I was sitting alone in the surgery, I began to reflect on the love of God, His goodness and my return, the number of blessings He has granted me, and how small my trials are compared with those some are called to endure. He thoroughly softened and humbled me. His love melted my icy, frost-bound soul, and sincerely did I pray for pardon for my ungrateful conduct, and had a wonderful manifestation of the love of God. Yes, He has humbled me and shown me what I am, revealing Himself as a present, a very present help in time of trouble. And though He does not deprive me of feeling in my trial, He enables me to sing, 'Yet will I rejoice in the Lord. I will joy in the God of my salvation.' Now I am happy in my Savior's love. I can thank Him for all, even the most painful experiences of the past, and trust Him without fear for all that is to come." The year 1851. I never made a sacrifice at Hudson Taylor in later years, looking back over a life that any objective observer would see as filled with self-denial. Yet he meant what he said, because his experience had taught him that whenever he made any sacrifice for God, his compensation was so full and overwhelming that giving up seemed more like receiving. And that was a lasting lesson he began to learn through some memorable experiences that winter at Drainside. No matter what sacrifice he made, the reward was greater. Despite the heartbreak of his lost love and an environment marked by bleak poverty, his spirit soared. He said, "Unspeakable joy all day long, and every day was my happy experience. God, even my God, was a living, bright reality, and all I had to do was joyful service." Even the tone of his letters changed, becoming less introspective and more focused on his plans for the future. China once more filled his thoughts. He felt and expressed even deeper concern for the spiritual condition of those who didn't know Christ as he did. Yet, despite his positive spirit, Hudson's mother worried about her son, his living conditions, and his health, especially after receiving reports from others that he looked pale and thin. When she wrote asking about his health, he responded in January, "I am sorry you make yourself anxious about me. I think it is because I've begun to wear a larger coat than everybody says how poorly and thin you look." He went on to assure that he had recovered quickly from a bad cold and was now healthy and taking care of himself. Evidently, his mother wasn't completely satisfied. She even began to worry about the rigors of his planned missionary services to China. So he wrote again in an attempt to allay her concern about his present and his future. "Do not let anything unsettle you, dear mother. Missionary work is indeed the noblest any mortal can engage in. We certainly cannot be insensible to the ties of nature, but should we not rejoice when we have anything we can give for the Savior? As to my health, I think I was never so well and hearty in my life. The winds here are extremely searching, but as I always wrap up well, I am pretty secure. The cold weather gives me a good appetite, and it would be dear economy to stint myself. So I take as much plain, substantial food as I need, but waste nothing on luxuries. I have found some brown biscuits which are really as cheap as bread, 18 pence a stone, and much nicer. For breakfast I have biscuit and herring, which is cheaper than butter, 3 for a penny and half a one is enough. with coffee. For dinner, I have at present a prune and an apple pie. Prunes are 2 or 3 pence a pound, and apples 10 pence a peck. I use no sugar, but loaf, which I powder. And at 4 pence halfpenny a pound, I find it is cheaper than a coarser kind. Sometimes I have roast potato and tongue, which is as inexpensive as any other meat. For tea, I have biscuit and apples. I take no supper, or occasionally a little biscuit and apple. Sometimes I have rice pudding, a few peas boiled instead of potatoes, and now and then some fish. By being wide awake, I can get cheese at 4 pence to 6 pence a pound that is better than we often have at home for 8 pence. Now I see rhubarb and lettuce in the market, so I shall soon have another change. I pickled a penny red cabbage with 3 halfpence worth of vinegar, which made me a large jarful. So you see, at little expense I enjoy many comforts. To these add a home where every want is anticipated, and the peace of God which passeth all understanding. And if I were not happy and contented, I should deserve to be miserable. In a letter that he is writing to his mother in January of 1851, he writes, "Continue to pray for me, dear mother. Though comfortable as regards temporal matters, and happy, and thankful, I feel I need your prayers. Oh, mother, I cannot tell you, I cannot describe how I long to be a missionary, to carry the glad tidings to poor, perishing sinners, to spend and be spent for him who died for me. Think, mother, of 12 millions, a number so great it is impossible to realize it. Yes, 12 million souls in China, every year passing without God and without hope into eternity. Oh, let us look with compassion on this multitude. God has been merciful to us. Let us be like him. I must conclude, would you not give up all for Jesus who died for you? Yes, mother, I know you would. God be with you and comfort you. Must I leave as soon as I can save money to go? I feel as if I could not live if something is not done for China." Yet, even though Hudson longed to go to the Orient, and to go at once, he wasn't entirely sure he was ready for the challenge. He wrote more of that winter in the little room at Drainside. "To me, it was a very grave matter to contemplate going out to China, far from human aid, there to depend on the living God alone for protection, supplies, and help of every kind. I felt that one's spiritual muscles required strengthening for such an undertaking. There was no doubt that if faith did not fail, God would not fail. But what if one's faith should prove insufficient? I had not at that time learned that even if we believe not, yet he abideth faithful. He cannot deny himself. It was consequently a very serious matter to my mind, not whether he was faithful, but whether I had strong enough faith to warrant my embarking on the enterprise set before me. When I get out to China, I thought to myself, I shall have no claim on anyone for anything. My only claim will be on God. How important to learn before leaving England to move man through prayer, through God, and by prayer alone." Hudson Taylor believed that the Bible said that faith could move mountains. But he wondered if his faith was yet strong enough to do the job. If it needed to grow, he decided he ought to exercise it. So that's what he did. To learn before leaving England to move man through God by prayer alone, that was his goal. And before long he came to see a simple, natural way to practice this exercise of his faith. He wrote of this lesson. "At Hall, my kind employer wished me to remind him whenever my salary became due. This I determined not to do directly, but to ask that God would bring the fact to his recollection, and thus encourage me by answering prayer. At one time, as the day drew near for the payment of a quarter's salary, I was as usual much in prayer about it. The time arrived, but Dr. Hardy made no allusion to the matter. I continued praying.